So if I reflect back on my life and where I'm at today, I never, ever in my wildest dream envisioned that I would be doing what I'm doing today. That's actually helping people reduce fossil fuel, understand their bill, Tom.
Yes.
And
Dan was with me earlier this week.
and then helping Jerry with electric vehicle charge stations. I mean, so the things that I'm doing now are very near and dear to my heart in many respects. And when I say that, as a kid growing up in this state, the only person I ever remember having air conditioning in their car when I was a kid growing up was the real estate agent, just so he could make his clients feel comfortable. Nobody had air conditioning in their house, and I mean, climate change is real, and it's here. And I remember as a kid growing up, I mean, the snowbanks always used to be, I realize a little shorter, but the snowbanks quite often were over my head. And today we don't have that same environment. Things are totally different. And which skier, as you think about Killington this past weekend, I mean, what kind of impact did the weather have on that? I mean, they were very fortunate in the fact that the temperatures changed so that they could actually make snow because, wait, Mother Nature wasn't going to help them out until Saturday, Friday afternoon, Saturday, in which, you know, a big event like that, it's pretty rough. So climate change is here, and one of the things that Governor Shumlin signed when he was in office was Act 56. Act 56 is the Clean Energy Act of the state of Vermont. And it's broken into 3 different tiers, in which I won't talk about tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3, or excuse me, I won't talk about tier 3. Tier 3 specifically is regard to reducing fossil fuel consumption by 95% by the year 2050. And the interesting thing is the governor didn't make that our responsibility, the Vermonters. He made the responsibility of the electric utilities to actually reduce that. So at first we're like, how are we going to pull this one off? We're going to take ratepayer money? How are we going to be able to incentivize folks to actually be able to reduce fossil fuel? Wait, we have RECs, renewable energy credits, that can't be sold by an individual, in which they all go into this pot, and then you've got places like in Virginia that are burning coal that need to buy renewable energy credits on a regular basis, so they actually have a face value. So how do we actually pay for tier 3 funding? We actually pay with it through renewable energy credits because we as a utility can sell them. You as an individual, you can hang them up on the wall and look at them after you do your solar installation, but they're really no value other than, yeah, I have some renewable energy credits. So everybody looks at tier 3 and says, well, geez, you're just taking money away from ratepayers. Well, no, we're not. It's actually funded by renewable energy credits. And part of that is the incentives that we offer for heat pumps. Full-time heat pumps, right now there's a $400 incentive for those. It used to be a mail-in rebate, but now it's actually point of purchase. So depending on income level, you could end up with an incentive anywhere from $750 up to about $1,600, $1,700, which will cover most of the cost of the full-time heat pump. I'm going to turn this off. It's not working. It was blinding me.
Save some electricity.
That's another interesting component. You know, let me continue with the things that we're offering. You know, electric vehicles. I mean, I personally had a plug-in hybrid pre-COVID. And after 18 months of sitting in my driveway looking at the car and only got 50 miles put on it during that period of time, I was like, you know what? Time to get rid of it. So I did. And I'm still looking for another electric vehicle. But I will say this, when we had the hybrid, incredible in the snow. You know, it has so much weight that it would go any place I wanted to go. Throw 4 snow tires on it and very comfortable from the standpoint of maintenance. Minimal maintenance. I think I ended up changing the oil. First year I had it, it was like 18 months when it was due for an oil change, and I took it into the mechanic, and he's like, "Dan, don't ever do that again." What do you mean, don't ever do that again? It's like your oil filter almost rotted off because it wasn't due for a service. The oil was still good. It hadn't gone 7,500 miles in those 18 months on the engine. I had gone way more than that using the hybrid drive. You know, so think about it from the standpoint of, good example, reduced maintenance, 18 months. And when I had the vehicle from pretty much May till about September, I didn't burn any gas. going to and from Rome pre-COVID, in which I would go 100% electric. Here's another story. First time I had to put gas in it, the first year I owned it, after driving for pretty close to 4 months without having to put any gas in it, I pulled up to the pumps. The gas tank's on the opposite side that my truck is. Boy, did I look like an idiot, not even knowing where. You know, so it's things like that we offer an incentive towards the purchase of a new vehicle, a used vehicle. We also offer a free in-home charger. Now, when you talk about reduced electricity, part of that is we're giving you a free charger. If you actually install a heat pump, we'll actually give you a sensible unit, which the sensible allows you to be able to control your heat pump from your smartphone. And we actually have a second home in Charlestown, Rhode Island, in which I can actually turn on the heat pump before we go down. So it's nice and toasty before we get there. But part of what we ask is during peak demand periods, allowing us to have access to your sensible by dropping the air temperature by 2 degrees or increasing the air temperature by 2 degrees, whether you've got it in heating or air conditioning. And also with your electric vehicle chargers, if we actually can not allow it to charge from say 3 p.m. in the afternoon till 10 p.m. at night, when we actually have a peak demand period, that frees up some excess capacity on the grid. One of the things I was talking about with Tom the other day when I met at T&M Enterprises is flexible load management. That's another option, in which we have a new anomaly here in the state of Vermont, in which we have excess solar that we're not harnessing from about 10 a.m. till about 1:30 p.m. Pretty much every day of the week, the sun's out. In which that excess, we can't afford to put battery backup in to harness all that. So we're actually incentivizing commercial customers to consume that energy as much as they possibly can during that period of time, and allowing them to avoid their peak demand. So if you're consuming during that period of time and you're part of our flexible load management pilot, we're not gonna charge you a demand charge. Flip side, one of the other things we're asking is during those peak periods, if you can actually shave your consumption. And typically those are 3 in the afternoon until about 10 at night. As a kid growing up, I don't know if everybody remembers when we used to have winter and summer rates. Well, it's kind of weird because my father always used to say, "Get out of the shower!" Like, why? It costs me twice as much this time of year than it does in the summertime. You can take as many showers as you want, as long as you want in the summertime. Okay, fine, got it. Well, those things have actually changed today, in which we're actually seeing a peak more in June, July, August, and September. And it's driven by the fact that, oh wait, not only the insurance, the real estate agent has air conditioning, but everybody has air conditioning now, because of the fact that we have so much humidity and climate change is here. So it's amazing. In a period of time, I'm 60 years old, in a period of time that some of you folks are way older than I am. I'm way older. But you've probably seen some extremes above and beyond what I've seen. Now, think about it from our kids and my 14-month-old granddaughter. What's the future look like for her? How are we going to mitigate climate change, and how are we going to actually do something to show that commercial that pops up every once in a while, that the kids on standing there and said, my parents always said that they were going to give me something to cry for, to cry about. And what they're crying about now is the fact that climate change, face it, I won't say all of us, but a lot of us have contributed to it. At which, any way we can mitigate that, any way we can turn it around, it's going to make for a better future. So that's a lot of stuff in a short period of time, and I could stand up here and talk for the next, I gotta be in a tree stand Saturday morning at 5:30, so. Yes.
I have a question. Well, I'm looking to put a heat pump in my, or at least look at what it takes to put it at our house, and have been calling GSK specifically for months. And they don't even call back to say, okay, we can come out in 3 weeks.
They are slow.
I know. So
Jerry,
what
I
do
think
we
Jerry
do?
could attest to that because of the fact that our incentives.
Well, I'll call you, yeah, yeah.
The incentives that we're offering, it just, I mean, first of all, it created a shortage issue, and the shortage issue is actually multiplied by the fact that COVID impacted it, and the fact that nobody's unloading everything in California, and, you know, so it just continues to snowball, in which, I mean, I feel your pain.
So you guys have time?
Well,
Yeah, okay, but at least you'll call me.
yeah, we run the same problems that Greg Christensen is up in Manchester, you know, you just can't get supplies.
And, you know, it used to be, you know, you went into a car dealership, picked out an electric vehicle, and you drove it home that day. Oh, wait, you can go pick out your car, but we'll see you in 6 to 8 months. And that's because of material shortages. I mean, if we're doing our part at Green Mountain Power, we actually have a bunch of hybrids and a bunch of electric vehicles in our fleet. And as a matter of fact, we're headed down the road of getting 46 Ford F-150 Lightnings, in which those are gonna be the vehicle of the future. And when I say that, not only can you charge it to drive it up and down the road, but you can actually utilize it to power your house during an outage.
Interesting.
Yes.
Two things. Bennington Cooling and Heating put 2 of those in my office. Wonderful job. But what is what's the cost of the electricity to charge a car compared to the cost of gas? I never.
So if you look at it in today's world, it's equal to buying gas at 75 cents a gallon.
So it's much cheaper to do that. And I guess the other thing is, I drive Subarus because of where I live, and I don't know that they make electric cars.
Mary Rogers has an electric Subaru.
I think it's a hybrid, but it didn't run very long on that battery. It was like almost nothing.
Well, it also depends on, you know, and here's the interesting thing. When I had an electric vehicle, it was a hybrid. But it's amazing how you change your mindset. It used to be, you know, go.
I live 15 miles from town.
And my mindset changed to the point that I would take off slowly from a stop sign. I would not punch it to the floor and go. I always was watching the needle to figure out, am I conserving my battery and am I not burning fossil fuel? And, you know, coasting, I mean, I used to love it when I drove the car to Rhode Island, because I would almost completely discharge my battery going up over Brownlee on Route 30. I live in Polteny. And as soon as I got to the top of Route 30, started going downhill, I would actually recharge those 42 miles by the time I got to Brattleboro. In which, you know, even though it was a hybrid, I averaged about 120 miles a gallon going to Rhode Island back.
Oh, now it recharged itself.
Yes, and that's the beauty of it. But the sad part is, if I didn't plan and I ran out of battery before I got to the top of Route 30, it recharged, but it wouldn't recharge enough to mount to anything. So it was all about conserving and mindset and how you drive. And I also recall driving around more often with the windows open on a hot summer day than driving around with the air conditioning on, because you could actually watch the battery start to discharge.
Yeah, Prius, yeah, you can.
And which, you know, it's like, okay, well, I'm comfortable. Do I need to be cold? No. And having the benefit of a heated steering wheel and heated seats, quite often in the wintertime, drove me to not turn the heat on. You know, you might turn it on for a few minutes just to defrost the windshield so you can see where you're going. But other than that, I mean, heated seat and heated steering wheel, it was just as comfortable as having the heat on. Yes?
A question on, you mentioned the renewable energy credits. What's the mechanics of that? I mean, you mentioned there's a coal burning plant in Virginia. I mean, who sells what to whom, and what is actually transferred, and how does one party or the other use that?
So, I'll give you the version that I understand, and I may not be 100% correct. I'll throw that disclaimer out there. No. So, if I, as an individual in Green Mountain Power Service Territory, throw up solar panels on my house. You have renewable energy credits, in which those renewable energy credits, which is part of the certificate of good, which you have to get from the state of Vermont to actually put the solar on, states that your renewable energy credits will go to Green Mountain Power. So Green Mountain Power has these renewable energy credits that they're hanging on to, and there's actually a market for them, in which that power plant that I was talking about in Virginia that's burning coal, they actually have Clean Air Quality Act that they need to follow and they need to meet. And they can avoid that by buying the renewable energy credits and say, okay, even though we weren't clean, we spent all this money and bought all of these renewable energy credits so that we're dirty but we're clean. We covered our tracks, for lack of better terms.
Yeah.
Does that answer your
Yeah, I
question?
mean, that's a little confusing, because essentially what they're saying is, those guys in Vermont are doing a good job, therefore I'm paying them to do their good job, while I can continue to burn coal. Is that essentially
That's it.
it? Okay,
The good thing is, though, they're actually stimulating our economy,
right, sure.
which is good but bad, you know, if you think about it from the standpoint of burning the coal. And with that being said, you know, Putnam Block is probably a great example of that. Putnam Block, I was highly involved with that project, in which all the cold climate heat pumps they put in there, they offset pretty close to, I think it was 61,000 gallons of propane. And we were capable of providing them with a very healthy incentive to eliminate that amount of propane. You know, so not only that, but Lake Perrin, the new apartments, I mean, that's 100% electric, in which everything in there is 100% electric. It actually has baseboard electric. And the reason why the state allowed it to go forward with baseboard electric is they enhanced the thermal envelope, in which I'd be willing to bet most of those locations, if they put them at 72 degrees and the power's out for 18 hours and it's 10 degrees outside, they might lose 3 degrees.
Wow.
That's how strong the thermal envelope is in those locations. Very incredible. Yes?
I've got 2 monitor heaters, you know what they are?
I do.
They were popular way back, I don't know if they still are up north, burn kerosene, and they're quite efficient. And then Jerry and Company put 2 split systems in for me several years back, so we could get some air conditioning. And they work very well too, so a basement and 3 floors in the house is a long story. But I run the monitors in the 2 lower levels and the split systems in the upper ones, which is where we live most of the time. So what's the economics there of things? I mean, this burning electricity, somebody's generating it. Are split systems more efficient now than anything else you can use?
Except for geothermal. And Jerry, if you want to jump in at any point in time, but geothermal is probably the most efficient. And when I say that, you think about the coefficients of performance. So if you actually have your furnace cleaned, you might see, when they get done with it, an AFU, which is the efficiency rating, of 85 to 93. And 93 is kind of the high end. You can actually go out there and buy a Vidaris unit today, and I think you can get 96% efficient. Is that correct, Jerry? So if you think about a cold climate heat pump, and you think about energy in and heat output on the other side, cold climate heat pump, you're putting 1 unit of energy in, you're getting 3 times that amount of energy out in the source of heat or air conditioning. Whereas you're way below a 1-to-1 ratio with propane, kerosene, any other fossil fuel source. So if you think about it, it's 17 cents a kilowatt hour for electricity. If oil is over $2.50 a gallon, it's cheaper to burn electricity. And a lot of people don't think about that. A lot of people look at it and say, damn it, my bill was $450. Oh wait, what was your oil bill? I didn't have one.
Big one up. Yeah, you said geothermal, we just had a discussion about that. And that's going on here in Vermont because of 2 things. One, you have such a demand for heat than you do southern states, you know, like Virginia and whatnot. So number one, you have to pump a lot more water in order to get enough heat to take care of your heat load. So therefore, you have to use electricity to pump more water. So the pumping cost was one thing. And then the second thing is you have to get rid of this water. You can't just recirculate it. You have to let it go back into the ground so it can pick up some heat, and then you can bring it back in. So you have to either put another well or a field out in your property. So being the great state of Vermont that we have, you hit a rock here and there, so your excavating costs were phenomenal. You know, so that's why they never work well in southern Vermont.
Well, you know, geothermal was big years ago, like 20, 30 years ago, when I was spending a lot more time in the building and heating and blah, 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 just as a homeowner. And I wondered why all of a sudden it had come back, because it seemed like it just faded out. But these pipes were like 500 feet down, stuff like that.
And Jerry's right, it takes a lot of energy to pump that water, but the coefficients of performance that I mentioned earlier, geothermal is like 7. You know, but once you overcome the expense of pumping that water, and I've seen quite a few locations that actually have 2 ponds on their property. And they're actually taking those ponds and using those instead of drilling a well, because the expensive part of the geothermal typically is those wells, in which you're gonna have one for intake and one for discharge. And hope that the water table underneath is feeding the two. But, you know, no guarantees there. But, you know, it's, COP is like 7+.
What about closed loop? I thought that was going to be the answer there.
The closed loop, I haven't seen a lot of people do closed loop systems.
Well, they do it in the Midwest, that's why my son had it.
Digging,
Yeah.
and digging rocks and digging.
And that excavation cost.
They actually do those, I've heard of some of those in Canada, but not many of them here, which I don't know why.
Well, if you're using the pond, you're just putting a pipe out of the pond, so that's a closed loop.
Right,
Yeah.
right, yep.
We had a customer that lived in his house from the day he was born to the time when he called us. He saw it in some book about this.
Popular mechanics.
Yeah, so he called us to put it in, and he said, "I've lived here forever." He says, "There's always been 3 feet of water in my basement, always, 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 always." We tried to talk him out of it, but anyways, we did it, did a good job, it worked, and in the first day, his cellar was dry.
Amazing.
Bone dry.
Water.
He had to put the pipe, he had to get more money and go out and go to the marshes and the swamp behind him.
That's amazing.
And so he died and his son took it out.
You know, one thing that I will say with cold climate heat pumps, they are awesome, but don't put them in as your only heat source. And when I say that, you know, I know, and Jerry, I know you argue this with me, but what I've seen from the standpoint of electric consumption is, doesn't matter whose it is. At 5 degrees above zero, switch over to an alternate source, because what'll happen is your heat output goes down, your energy consumption goes up. And you get to a point around 5 degrees, regardless of manufacturer, that you'll see a 1-to-1 ratio. That's like the old days of baseboard electric. So if you truly want to see the savings and the benefit of your heat pumps, run them down to about 5 degrees, then switch over to, and I hate to say it, a fossil fuel source, but that's going to be your best alternative to actually see the best return on your investment. And the other thing is, learn how to operate the heat pump. Once you understand how to operate it, you'll absolutely love it. What settings did you have? So, I don't know, whatever you left it at. Well, you had it on auto, so it was cooling and heating at the same time. So when I say that, it was keeping the room very comfortably at 70 degrees. But if it overheated the space, or when the sun shined in the windows and actually warmed up the room, it would switch over to air conditioning. Now, my electric bill for that month when I was down there was about twice what it normally is, because of the fact that the unit all weekend long, it was there, was heating and cooling, heating and cooling, heating and cooling. So it's like, learn how to operate it. Don't ever use the auto mode for heating and cooling. Don't ever use the auto fan. And once you get to a comfortable point, set it for comfort, not temperature, because it's reading the temperature up on the thermistor, which is up on the side of the evaporator head, unless you actually put in remote thermostats. And getting that through some people's heads is very challenging. It's reading the temperature over there, so if you set it at 74, it's gonna be 74 over there. Where you're sitting 15 feet away in your recliner, it might be 68, but if you want it 74, you're probably gonna have to turn that up to 78. But set it for comfort, and once you get it to a point that you're comfortable with it, set it and forget it.
Yeah.
Leave
Big
it
thing
alone.
with
Let it do its thing. You'll absolutely love it if you do that.
What about those of us that turn the temperature down at night?
Or open the window.
I do, I turn mine
Oh.
on.
Not
That's your decision, because some folks say that it doesn't make a lot of sense to do that. It costs just as much energy to bring it back up as it does to turn it, keep it consistent. Some folks say you save money, and I'm not gonna say which way is the right way to do it, but I will tell you this much. At our house, we close our bedroom door and open the window.
You what?
We close our bedroom door and open the window at night. Unless it's 10 below zero. Then we might crack the window.
God, you are a Vermonter.
But we had an old oil boiler, and still some of the old radiators in the house and everything. We got rid of the oil burner, put in gas, 98%, 97% efficient gas boiler with the heat pumps, and for the first year, we saved $2,300.
And the thermal envelope's very, very important. And when I say that,
That was the warmest I've been in 42 years.
Jerry,
Yeah.
we're slacking for 42 years.
He
I'm getting
tried.
old. I'm getting old, I put in heat pumps.
Do you see, I had a whole house heat pump, and it was SEER 18, I think is where it was when it was put in. And the backup fuel was electric resistance, because it was, back and forth. Well, when petroleum prices went up, it was a good deal, but yeah, $600 bill occasionally, but
And it happens. And the other thing I'll mention to you is, you can actually go back, if you're not on rate 11, you can go back on rate 11.
yeah, this is out of state, so
Oh, okay.
it doesn't apply.
Okay. You have a red light that shows you when you're off peak and on peak in the house?
No, I don't.
Okay.
You,
The old CV days, there's a red light that came out of the house that showed you were on peak. And that's when you weren't supposed to use the dryer because it would cost you dearly. So, yes,
On the lighter side, have you seen the commercial of the squeegee when the guy pulls into the gas to fill his electric vehicle?
Yes.
And the guy won't give him this.
yep, yep.
For those of you that don't know, that's, the pushback from the fossil fuel people. They don't want you filling, or don't want you just using their squeegee. without buying gas. The other question I have though is, along Route 7 to Massachusetts, when you put in the new poles down there, you left the old ones. Is there a logical reason to that?
Well, there is a logical reason for that. And a lot of
Besides
people
cheaper,
think that it's our problem, but keep in mind, we own some poles, Consolidated owns some poles, AT&T owns some poles, and it depends on geographic area. Those poles may not be ours. The old poles, the new poles, we put them in there. We may have put them in there on behalf of Consolidated or AT&T, or there's like 6 or 7 other entities. So we may have put the new poles in and taken over responsibility for that line. But quite often, when you see those poles just hanging out there, they're not our poles. They belong to somebody else. They need to remove them.
But I don't see that other places. I mean, why, I'm saying it doesn't look good to me.
No,
But
I
my-
completely agree with you.
Okay, but my point is, why is it there and not universal? Or is it, you know,
I wish I had a good answer for that.
okay, I'll take that.
Back in the days when President Eisenhower had electrification occur, utility companies owned all the poles. Then all of a sudden, Ma Bell came through and everybody got phones, in which there are places that the electricity didn't go that people wanted phones. So that's how we ended up with utility company owns this pole, and I'll give you a real good example. If anybody's familiar with Route 7 going to Pittsburgh, Vermont, from Rutland to Pittsburgh, there's the first 5 poles are GMP. The next 8 poles are consolidated. Then it switches back to GMP because we bought the little utility that was there. Then it switches to AT&T. Then it switches back to GMP. Then it switches to, I think it's Verizon. So it's, people, we get a car pole accident in the middle of the night, and the line crew are like, we're just gonna go replace the pole. Right, that's the right thing to do, because you want to put the power back on. But the next thing is trying to get Verizon, AT&T, and Consolidated to pay us because we replaced their pole, and they would have dispatched somebody from Rochester, New Hampshire,
Yeah.
to come up to replace the pole, which they wouldn't have been there by the time we had the power back on. So it's,
So it's a different topic, but at first I thought we would see everyone have their own solar array on their roof or something and then work in a grid. It doesn't seem to be going that way. Why is that? Why can't, I mean, if somebody builds out in the hinterlands, they put in a solar and can run their thing on it. Why not every building have its own?
that would be awesome if they did, and I think a lot of it's driven by the fact of cost, sheer cost. Vermont is not one of the richest states in the country, in which people.
But if individuals would do that for their source.
Yep, that would be perfect. And we actually had a foreign exchange student probably 8 years ago that stayed at our house from Germany. First day he was here, he's like, you guys don't have any solar panels. What's the deal? What do you mean? Every house in Germany has solar panels on it, and it's actually subsidized by the government. So they put on solar panels on their house regardless of who you were. And you either could pay for them, or they're gonna put them on your house and they're just gonna pump the power back to the grid. You get no benefit. So you would get benefit if you actually bought them and installed them. You know, so it's a totally different environment, different way of doing things. And you're right. If everyone had solar panels on their roof, life would be a lot better here in Vermont. Because we have a totally new runway in which we're heading down that road. And that's actually, instead of being an importer of power, by the time we are 100% renewable, right now we're 100% carbon free, our grid is. Once we're 100% renewable, we'll actually be able to export power during peak demands as opposed to import power during peak demands. And when I say that, it's going to require anybody who has an EV to allow us to stop its charging during that peak demand. Anybody who has a Ford F-150 Lightning, if we don't have an outage, we don't need that battery capacity. We're going to pull the battery capacity out of your truck and we're going to feed it back to the grid. We're going to sell it to somebody in New York City, like Con Edison, at $18 a kilowatt hour as opposed to 17 cents that we're charging here. In which, that's part of the reason for avoiding the peak demand is the fact that you buy spot market power, trust me, whatever the going rate is, that's what you're gonna pay. There's no discount when you need it like now.
You know, speaking of batteries, 5, 6, 700, how many years ago, Green Mountain Power had a good deal, which we took advantage of with the Tesla Powerwalls. And I don't know if that's still available, but we put 2 of them in. And first of all, we don't have to have a generator if we lose power, because it will power the house for 3 or 4 days, probably more. But the deal was $15 a month, 20 years for each of those Powerwalls, which is $30 a month. 360 a year times 20 years is whatever. It costs you $5, $6, $7, $8,000 to put a generator in your house, and you still have to fuel it up and maintain it and blah, blah, blah. So I tell everybody, you know, if it's still out there. This is a fantastic deal. Now, is it still out there or something?
It's still out there, but the deal that you got was one of the early adopter deals, in which I wish everybody had that opportunity to get there, because that was very inexpensive, in which you ended up with about a $12,000 value
Yeah.
for, you're never gonna pay that much back. So that was actually subsidized by some tier 3 money that I talked about earlier, which is from the energy credits.
And they do the same thing, you know, you guys do. You take the power out of our power wells if you need it.
And I think you may be on the program that we don't actually give you credit for it, but the next generation, the current generation, we actually, it's more expensive to put power walls in, but we actually give you credit for the energy that we can pull out of your batteries. You know, so it could be a moneymaker for some folks.
Just wanted to talk to Carol's question. One of the reasons why you don't see self-contained houses is because you can't get a mortgage on one unless you're tied into the grid. The bank doesn't.
Oh, was
The bank doesn't. You may like it, but the next person down the line might not want the solar panel.
That's true with municipal water too.
Yeah.
That's quite
Anything else? Hopefully I shared a little bit of information, and hopefully it was worthy of my time. I feel as though it was worthy of my time.
No,
I greatly
definitely.
appreciate the
Yeah,
opportunity.
very
And
much so.
thank you for the lunch, and thank you for inviting me.
Great. Thank you.